Hello, everyone, and welcome to Never Mind the Dam Busters, the RAF Bomber Command podcast with me, Jen Gulliford-Lowes, and my host, James Jeffers. In today's episode, we're going to be chatting about Bomber Command in the Battle of Britain. Now, I know we've been promising this for absolutely ages. We finally got around to it, okay? Now, I know that Bomber Command isn't probably the first thing that comes to mind when we think about the Battle of Britain. It's all sort of Spitfires and Hurricanes battling with Luftwaffe bombers over the White Cliffs of Dover, all that sort of nonsense, in the summer of 1940. But Bomber Command's contribution is something that's really becoming ever more apparent in the narrative. This has been the subject of many talks that James has given, and also, happily for us and luckily for you, his MA dissertation. So, James, what made you choose this as an MA topic?
Well, firstly, I just want to say my voice isn't quite up to normal standards. I've got a little bit of a cold, so I do apologise for the way I might sound. But this came about really, I had to pick a topic when I did my MA at Essex. And I knew I wanted to do something on the Battle of Britain. And it was, what am I going to say that's going to be new, original? And I was reading accounts about the battle, and I kept finding this kind of narrative of Bomber Command. And one that especially spoke to me was the fact that Bomber Command were attacking Luftwaffe airfields in daylight for a period over the battle. And it just it just put everything on its head about how I understood this battle as a very defensive battle. Like you say, the Spitfires over the south coast of England and such like. I mean, that narrative was changing. I'd already fallen in love with the Hurricane and such like. But it made me want to dig deeper. And as I did, I found more sources, and especially the way that there are accounts from the time the battle was presented. And we're going to go into this as speeches by Churchill and such like, and the memorials and the roll of honours and such like. It made me want to dive further into it and also get more of a Luftwaffe German perspective on what was happening as well. And yeah, I found quite a few revelations in it. And when I looked at it, I realised that you can't just look and go from the official account. So what is the official account, like 10th of July onwards? Bomber Command are involved much more before that. And even before then, the Battle of France is important. Norway is important. The raids right at the beginning of the war in setting what Bomber Command is in 1940. And I mean, we'll talk about this later, but another thing really is the difference between Bomber Command in 1940 and 1944 is immense. Not just in what they can do, but the scale. You might as well be comparing the British Army in 1815 to 1915. It's that different. It doesn't feel like four years. So that is one of the things definitely to really think about when you come into this topic.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency to kind of just look at Bomber Command as sort of one thing from sort of beginning to the end of the war, but it's not. It's very sort of almost amorphous. It's constantly developing, constantly changing. The technology is obviously constantly changing, and the size of it just increases absolutely exponentially from sort of 43, mid-43 onwards. And that's something which I think often gets overlooked. So the Bomber Command, which is taking part in the Battle of Britain in the summer of 1940, is just a completely different thing to the Bomber Command, which is undertaking strategic bombing in 43, 44 and into 45. It's a completely different thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely. And yeah, so let's reel back here. I point viewers here, don't do it right now because you want to finish this podcast first, but to get a deeper dive in how Bomber Command formed, was it our second episode when we said Bomber Command begins? Rewind. That was the first one, wasn't it? It seems so long ago now, doesn't it? Have a little listen to that as well for a deeper dive, but we're going to go in how Bomber Command was structured and such. Like it's very small at this stage of the war. But 3rd of September 1939, the first sortie is within an hour of the Prime Minister's speech. You get a Bristol Blenheim patrolling the north coast of Germany, looking for German shipping and seeing what's going on. So Bomber Command's war, for a start straight away. And the next day, the 4th of September, Blenheim bombers, again Blenheims, from 107 and 110 squadrons attacked German naval ships in the north part of Germany. 5 out of 10 Blenheims are lost. On the 14th of December, there's a little bit of a gap. There are a few more raids, but there's a little bit of a gap. They come back in December. They're flying in daylight, close formations, a little bit of what happens with the Americans. There's this idea of close formations, the gunners protecting the other bombers and such like. Well, it doesn't play out. And examples here, 14th of December, 12 Wellington bombers, 5 out of 12 are shot down. On the 18th, 24 Wellington bombers attacking Wilhelmshaven. 12 of the 22 are lost. And this quickly kind of rings bells in the high command to go, okay, we can't attack in daylight. We're far too vulnerable to ground fire, to the enemy fighters, and Messerschmitt 110s and Messerschmitt 109s. But, and this is the thing that's sometimes forgotten, not all Bomber Command aircraft are now just flying by night, because the Plenums of 2 group are flying by day. And the same with the AASF, sorry. The Fairy Battles are also going to be flying in daylight, which again, I think, Jane, is something that is sometimes a little bit, it didn't work out, and Bomb Command immediately flew by night from December, and there's just a couple of exceptions. It really wasn't the case at all. So the next stage really is we've got this, and we've got these raids, and Jane did an episode when I unfortunately couldn't make it on Norway, and this again is another sort of moment for Bomber Command. It's the first, I'd probably say, the first big sort of campaign in the West in the terms of the Axis forces, the Germans, on the ground with an invasion, where Bomber Command can take an active part. And this is something we can chat about, because when I was diving into the Battle of Norway, I was looking at the use of bombers against the Kriegsmarine, and wondered, Jane, could you give just another little tiny potted overview of this?
Yeah. Okay, so the invasion of Norway takes everybody by surprise, not least the Norwegians, unfortunately. And by the time we get our act together and actually in a position to do something about it, sending bomber aircraft over, the Germans are already well advanced. Troops have landed. There are ships all over the place heading to various different harbours, right far up Norway, far up as Narvik, etc. So we are very, very lit apart, shall we say. So where does Bomber Command fit into all of this? Well, there's basically a three-pronged approach. Bomber Command are attacking German air bases, particularly at Bergen and Stavanger. So this is the south part of Norway, and Oslo, because bear in mind as well, Norway's a long way away. They're the only ones that they could reach. So anything sort of in the far north of the country, you haven't got a chance. But they're also attacking Luftwaffe bases in Denmark and Germany itself. Then they're also targeting Kriegsmarine shipping. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on the water. Troops being transported, there's equipment being transported backwards and forwards all the time. Dozens and dozens of ships. There's convoy ships, supply ships, as well as the German Kriegsmarine ships. So they are targeting shipping, or attempting to target shipping at sea and in ports and harbours in Germany and Norway. Losses are high. For example, there's 9 Hamdens in Wellington shot down in an anti-shipping raid on Stavanger on 12th of April. They're also undertaking mine laying. This begins on the 13th of April 1940, 4 days after the invasion, but not because of it. It was already planned to take place. But the invasion of Norway certainly made it more urgent. So again, they're targeting enemy shipping routes and causing massive disruption. And this part in particular is massively successful, probably much more so than the bombing, but never gets mentioned. So that they are laying mines around the east coast of Denmark, belts and sounds, Kattegat, Skagerrak, between Norway and Denmark, that sort of thing. The main problem is that it's the distance to be covered. You're looking at round trips of 1,000 miles or more, most of it over sea, without any fighter escort. And it causes massive problems. And the losses are so high, Bomber Command decided very, very early on in the game to adopt a very, very conservative approach. They are very concerned to conserve their assets. Basically, they're sending out relatively small numbers of aircraft because they simply can't afford to lose them all at this stage, particularly when the situation on the continent is looking very uncertain. Nobody knows what's going to happen, who's going to be next. So that's pretty much the situation. We've got something like 884 sorties flown, 31 aircraft lost, 11 Luftwaffe aircraft shot down, and 11 ships sunk. And losses for Bomber Command over Norway are around about 3.7%. Having said that, that's probably about standard as it was to turn out throughout the course of the war. But bearing in mind, this is like the first big campaign, if you like, and 3.7% seems like a lot at this particular time. So what's next for the bombers after Norway, James?
Well, next is the Battle of France, and I probably will get onto the Battle of Britain soon, but this is all very important, and this is where the role of the AASF comes in. As I say, this is the Advanced Air Striking Force, and initially a large part of it was made up of one group bomber command, which is armed with ferry battles. Again, we go into it a little bit in another episode, and one of the tasks that they're involved with, and the two group of Blenheims are involved as well, is to raid the bridgeheads where the Germans have advanced over the Ardennes. So this is especially over the bridges and such like. And they do this in daylight, and they come under absolutely hideous fire from the ground. It's mainly from the ground. There are elements that are shot down from the skies. There are mix-ups where they're supposed to be fighter escorts, but they meet up at the wrong time and such like. That there's one account where some Blenheims go into battle. I can't remember, this is off the top of my head. They see one Blenheim sort of fly, one Hurricane fly along them for a little while, and then decides to buzz off, and then they're completely on their own. And they're a bit like, was that supposed to be the fighter escort? Because that was just like, it wasn't. And I've still not got to the bottom of that. And you have some horrendous moments. So 82 Squadron, 11 out of 12 Blenheims failed to return in one raid on these troop movements. So yeah, we'll return to 82 Squadron later. That's not the end of their story. So keep that in mind. You do have the first VCs of the Royal Air Force. Not technically Bomber Command, but you have two that are awarded. It's Gray and Garland. They get the Victoria Crosses for bombing, destroying the bridge over the Meuse. So there's a lot going on, and 71 aircraft are lost just on the 14th of May, attacking German troops. 71. And to think, Bomber Command, I mean, how big are they at this stage? Probably a few hundred bombers. 71. The majority of battles and Blenheims. I know, it takes a moment, doesn't it? And we think, and as a percentage loss rate of a force, that's probably the worst suffering that the RAF bomber forces have in the war. I know you've got the Nuremberg raid, 30th March, 44, where 95 and 106, I think, are knocked out permanently, that are written off altogether. But yeah, as a percentage of force, this is probably more of a hit. And you've got the days either side with losses, especially beforehand. Yeah. And the equivalent, and this is, it's absolutely not. And the equivalent of 15 squadrons, bomber squadrons, RAF squadrons are lost in the Battle of France, resulting in the AASF being disbanded because they're wiped out the sky. Absolutely wiped out the sky. We also see the RAF bombers for the first time attack Germany. So the phrase I use here is, this is when the gloves are off. The Luftwaffe have bombed Warsaw earlier. They have bombed Rotterdam. And now it's a case of, okay, the bombers are now going to go and bomb, aiming for industrial targets. But bear in mind, at this point of the war, the accuracy is not the best. And this is something that we're probably going to discuss when we look at the Butt report and such. And I know we have mentioned it on previous pods. However, it's not totally horrendous. And this isn't the only option for the RAF bombers. And they help with the evacuation at Dunkirk. And just a very, very quick moment. I love the fact that you got the Blenheim appearance in the Christopher Nolan film 2017. I nearly jumped. It's the best bit. Yeah. It's the best bit. I'm sorry, Spitfire fans, all the rest of it. That moment, I nearly jumped out my cinema seat and went, oh my goodness, there's a Blenheim on screen. And actually, they have a much better time of it. They get fighter cover, they silence batteries, they attack the troop movements from the German forces on the ground. So in comparison, and I'm going to use the Bristol Blenheim losses here, between the 10th of May, 39 are lost in 181 sorties, which is 20%, which is totally unsustainable. And these are mainly experienced pre-war crews. Irreplaceable, really.
All your experienced crews, aren't you? You're just wiping them out in one fell swoop. Yeah. Who's now going to come in and take over the roles that they're doing? And also, where are you going to get the aircraft from? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But now they have fighter cover and they're supporting the BEF. The loss rate goes to 2%. So 16 are lost in 750 sorties. So still obviously tragic, but you're cutting from 20% to 2%. Just by having fighter cover, not flying unescorted deep behind enemy lines. And this is a force that's going to be very, very important when it comes to Bomber Command's role in the Battle of Britain. So after the fall of France, We now reached the Battle of Britain. We can have a little little moment of applause there. It wasn't too bad, actually. It was about 10 minutes, I think.
It's 15, James, but never mind, yeah.
Was it 15? It's the same thing. Yeah, we got there in the end. But this is all important context because there are lessons learned. We see how stretched Bomber Command is at this point. And Jane, actually, there's the campaign really to talk about, the silent campaign, the one that you've mentioned many times. Can you tell us a little bit about Bomber Command we're doing to pen in the Kriegsmarine at this point and helping with the Royal Navy and such like?
Yeah. Well, everyone thinks the Bomber Command were just trying to bomb ships at sea, which was, well, not very successful, put it that way. Sometimes we were carrying out bombing raids in sort of other ports and harbours, vessels in dry dock, that sort of thing, which were marginally more successful. But the main method that we were using to target both Kriegsmarine and German merchant shipping, which is obviously keeping the logistics
absolutely,
is through mine laying, by laying air-laid mines. And these are laid by bomber aircraft in relatively shallow water. So we're not talking about dropping mines in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the North Sea or whatever. That's what the Navy's for. We are talking about Bomber Command aircraft coming into places where the Navy can't get to. So we're talking about ports, harbours, estuaries, all those sort of close-in shipping lanes around, sort of between Denmark and Germany, up around Sweden, up towards Norway, that sort of thing. And they're also targeting things like the Kiel Canal, which saves you from going from Kiel all the way around the top of Denmark, right round to Wilhelmshaven. You just cut straight through. And it is massively successful. And no one ever talks about this, but it's causing absolute chaos. And the introduction of mine laying by Bomber Command basically forces the Germans within just a couple of months to adopt their own convoy system. Everyone talks about the Allies in Europe and the British Royal Navy convoys, etc. But the Germans were doing it as well on a much smaller scale. But they were forced to do that by Bomber Command mine laying because it was just too dangerous for ships to just sail independently because they were getting just blown up all over the place. A little bit better how mine laying works. We're just going to touch on this. We are going to be doing an episode on this at some point in time. So as I've said, the mines lie on the bed of the, whether it be the sort of the coast or the rivers or estuaries, harbours or whatever. So they lie sort of at the bottom. And these are magnetic and acoustic mines, and they are triggered by the passing overhead of a large magnetic object, i.e. a ship, or by the vibrations from the ship's engines. And I don't want you to think of them as sort of causing a massive explosion. It's not the explosion. We're not talking about blowing ships up. How it works is that when the mine fires, when it's triggered, it basically creates a massive pressure wave underneath the water, and it's the pressure wave which basically breaks the back of these ships. So we talk sort of any kind of ship can be, a victim to this. So it can be cargo ships, it can be little R boats, E boats, whatever. It can be Kriegsmarine vessels, merchant ships, anything can be a victim. And it's causing absolute chaos at this particular time, from sort of, right from April when it's first implemented. And this goes on right throughout the war. Again, this is something which never gets mentioned. It goes right up to the beginning of May 45. And the number of vessels which are sunk, we're not talking, 30, 40, 50 here. We are talking between, well, latest figures, I think somebody in the region of about 750 vessels are sunk by bomber in this manner. So it's really, really important, and it has a massive impact on German logistics, basically. So that's what Bomber Command are trying to do, on top of everything else that they're trying to do at the same time. So they're doing mine laying, they're trying to bomb ships in ports and harbours, and obviously they're doing the ordinary bombing operations as well. So to say that they're stretched is putting it mild. But what else are Command up to then, James, at this particular point in time?
Well, as I say, that you summarised it well, that they are really, really stretched, and we're going over. And this is a tiny force still. Remember that this is a very, very small force. So you have them also bombing the Ruhr. On top of all of this, and, supporting at Dunkirk and such like, you have now a third of bombers on invasion readiness. So they are ready to go at the drop of a hat if there are German ships ready, in the channel coming over for an invasion. But one of the things I do want to talk about now is the attacks on Luftwaffe airfields, which is one of the things that initially got me into wanting to talk about this topic. And this is ordered from the 19th of June and ends in early September.
It's a pretty long time, isn't it? And obviously, the Luftwaffe defensive force bombing airfields from mid-August to the end of early September. How successful are these raids, and who's actually carrying them out, and how are they being conducted?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a mixture here. Generally, it is two groups. It is the Blenheims that are doing this. Again, mainly by daylight, and there's a strict rule that they can only attack in 7/10 cloud. So that's 70% of the sky covered in cloud that they can fly in and out of. There's no fighter escort. Obviously, fighter command, all the British fighters, the RAF fighters are busy defending London and the south coast and the rest of Britain in the Battle of Britain. And they've got quite a task ahead of them. So they have over 400 Luftwaffe airfields that are identified to attack. And that's probably more airfields than aircraft. Yeah. So, you're getting that through, you've got to do this, chaps. And it's just like, what? I'd be scratching my head going, how are we going to do this? 90% of the planned attacks are actually abandoned because there isn't this crucial cloud cover. However, there are examples where the cloud cover breaks and the aircraft carry on with the expected results, but we'll go into that in a little bit. In total, there are 1,097 sorties on Luftwaffe airfields in this period. During the battle, 5 are destroyed, others are temporarily put out of action and damaged. 61 RAF aircraft are lost. So this doesn't go without casualties. Another aspect is from the Luftwaffe perspective, and I'm gonna do a bit of an exclusive here. Not many people have read it, but this is from my dissertation, the section, very brief section on what I say and some of the sources I found on the Luftwaffe. So here we go. Reading accounts from Luftwaffe personnel during and shortly after the battle paint a more interesting picture, and it appears the raids did indeed have an impact on the morale of the Luftwaffe aircrew. Siegfried Bechter frequently mentions raids by the RAF and how, quote, the English continue to penetrate, unquote, and that any attacks on England by the Luftwaffe are swiftly returned by RAF bombers. So they're going up, they're doing their thing, and they come home and they're being attacked by RAF bombers. But anyway, I continue. Bechter also recalls how the Wehrmacht reported, quote, strong bomb attacks, unquote, and that Berlin had been bombed. So we're jumping a little bit. But Berlin, the mighty Berlin, call me Meyer, Goering says, doesn't he? If Berlin is bombed, no bombs shall fall on Berlin and all this sort of stuff. Well, it does. I continue. Bechter strongly feels that the RAF was a very tough opponent and one much tougher than the French Air Force. And this is what he says in his letters and his diaries. Bechter is not alone in his thoughts. Ulrich Steinhilper, another Luftwaffe pilot, wrote a letter to his mother describing how the raids on the airfield he was stationed at, quote, are slowly getting on her nerves at night because of their persistent activity, unquote. During the battle, it was not uncommon for the Luftwaffe pilots to fly up to 5 sorties a day, so they were constantly exhausted. A further strain of relentless raids by day and night would add to their exhaustion and stress. And I quote James Holland here in his books, certainly believes that these raids, quote, showed just how much the Bomber Command attacks were contributing to this battle, unquote, and that this in turn had an important psychological effect. And this is something that other historians, Stephen Bungay has talked about, for example, saying that this is an important part of the battle and the Luftwaffe are feeling it. They are feeling the strain. And it's certainly something that I want to take more and more of a deeper dive on.
I always tend to think that it's kind of just like a one-way thing, isn't it? The Luftwaffe coming over here and us, taking it to the air and trying to fend them off, if you like. But in fact, it's very much a two-way process. We're giving as good as we're getting, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and you. Yep, and you have Luftwaffe fighters on the ground prepared to take off to intercept these nuisance raids, these Blenheims. And this is at night as well, so it's not just the Blenheims by day, there are night raids. Now, granted, the accuracy isn't up to what happens later on in the war, but it's still annoying and airfields are hit. And I've mentioned 82 Squadron earlier, who lost 11 out of 12 aircraft in the Battle of France. On the 13th of August, Eagle Day, they were ordered to attack Aalborg airfield in Nazi-occupied Denmark and met fire from the airfield's ground defences. 4 were shot down as they made their attack. The surviving Blenheims were shot down on their way home by German ones, and in total 20 crew members were killed, with 8 surviving to become prisoners of war. Again, only one aircraft, I think, manages to make it back home. So they're destroyed completely again. The squadron that died twice, they're known as 82 Squadron. They kind of break orders. The cloud opens up and it's clearer, but they decide to press on, the press on spirit, as I've said before. And you think about it, Eagle Day, yeah, this is starting to get to the height of the Battle of Britain. They want to stop those bombers from coming over and bombing Britain. They want to stop the invasion. They're pressing on. And one thing, actually, a previous guest I spoke to about this is the Battle of Britain film. You've got Eagle Day, where the Luftwaffe are absolutely shot out the sky, unescorted, attacking the northeast of England. Well, this was happening with RAF bombers in daylight at the same time. But we don't talk about that. And yeah, this is why I want to talk about this. The Battle of Britain is not just that narrative, that story. And so you can see that as well as this and the damage that I've mentioned, they're not just nuisance raids. There is damage being done. And I think it demonstrates, as I say, it's not purely defensive narrative. And as I say, we'll pick up a little bit more on this in our next episode as we continue what I think is an absolutely incredible story.
We probably should have mentioned at the beginning of this episode, this is actually going to be a 2-parter, but otherwise it would be like miles too long. So, yeah. We're going to be talking a bit about that in the next episode, and we're going to be sort of exploring things in a little bit more detail. We're also going to be looking at some of the VCs. We're going to be talking about the Battle of the Barges, various other bits and pieces. So there's so much to talk about just in relation to Bomber Command and the Battle of Britain. Is there anything else that you want to add to this particular episode, James, before we shut this one down and move on to part 2?
Well, again, this is the thing. We've only got up to the middle of August 1940, and the big parts of the Battle of Britain that we're familiar with, Battle of Britain Day, the crucial period at the end of August and such, that hasn't happened yet. And we're going to be talking about Churchill making his speech, the Few speech, in the next episode. This is definitely. This is where we are right now. This is pretty much just before, around the time of that speech. It's the battle, you could argue, is actually mainly Bomber Command's battle. They're attacking the Kriegsmarine. They're ready to fend off an invasion. They've got things prepped. Even to the point of, the ferry battles are going to be used, and they're talking about using training aircraft, strapping bombs on them if the invasion comes, because they're so stretched at this time, and they're attacking Luftwaffe airfields, and they're bombing the Ruhr, and they're doing general patrols. And of course, next week, we've got to mention Coastal Command, because they're involved in all this as well.
Coastal Command as well, so I always get grief for not mentioning Coastal Command, so yeah.
I've
for the next episode.
I've got so much time for Coastal Command.
Yeah, I really want to do a separate episode dedicated just to Coastal Command at some point in time. So we need to get a specialist guest on for that, I think. Yeah, there's just so much to talk about there. Yeah. I must admit, when I was writing and researching my mine laying book, because Coastal Command do quite a bit of the early mine laying as well, they contribute to that. I have sort of fallen in love a little bit with the swordfish. But yeah, that's a whole other story.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah. Definitely.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what's coming up next then. Tune in for part 2, which will be coming up very shortly. As always, do give us a follow on social media. We're on X, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube. And please do continue to send any questions. We always love questions, and we get some absolute belters, don't we?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. If you've enjoyed this and wish to leave a review and or star rating wherever you get your podcasts, we would gratefully appreciate it. And if you'd like to help us produce more great content, please hit that subscribe button in the show notes. This all helps us massively to continue to bring this podcast to you. And a massive thank you to everyone who has subscribed recently. You know who you are. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.